In today's episode of the Giraldo Show, we're going to be discussing Ted Cruz and Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez joining forces, Ukraine president fully on saying that President Trump did not pressure him to start the Ukraine investigation, and a breaking news story about the CIA whistleblower apparently having worked with Joe Biden. My name is Sebastian Giraldo, and you're listening to the Giraldo Show. Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for tuning in to today's episode. My name is Sebastian Giraldo, and you're listening to The Giraldo Show. I'm hoping everyone is having a fantastic Friday, and let's go ahead and get right into the stories. So today's stories are going to focus once again on the recent NBA and China controversy and more of the Ukraine story. So let's get into the first story of Ted Cruz and AOC, or Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, joining forces to criticize NBA's China cowardice. So you might be thinking, Ted Cruz and Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, for those who don't know, Ted Cruz, he's a Republican from Texas, a senator for Republican from Texas, and AOC is a representative from New York City. So it might be weird that both of those people, that both of the parties are joining together for some reason like the NBA, but apparently both parties have big issues with the NBA's bending down to China's economic ties with the NBA. So in a 2-page letter to NBA Commissioner Adam Silver, the group that includes Ted Cruz, Ben Sasse, a Republican from Nebraska, Tom Cotton, a Republican from Arkansas, Ron Wyden, a Democrat from Oregon, and Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, a Democrat from New York. So in their 2-page letter, the group excoriates the league's decision to issue an unqualified apology to Chinese officials after Houston Rockets manager Daryl Morey sent a single public tweet expressing support for pro-democracy protesters in Hong Kong. So for those who haven't been listening into the news, I have a couple episodes on what's happening. So basically, Adam Silver and the NBA released statements that pretty much support China in lieu of Daryl Morey, the general manager of the Houston Rockets, sending a pro-Hong Kong tweet. So pretty much the NBA gave up fighting for American values and democracy to keep economic ties with China. So the group really did not pull any punches. Some parts of the letter state, "It is outrageous that the Chinese Communist Party is using its economic power to suppress the speech of Americans inside the United States. It is also outrageous that the NBA has caved to Chinese government demands for the contrition. Hundreds of millions of people within China will read your statements as an admission that their government's propaganda is correct. Billions of people in Hong Kong will be dispirited. That you have more potential fans in China than in Hong Kong is no excuse for being over backwards to express sensitivity only to one side." And this is completely correct. The only reason that the NBA issued any sort of apology is because of some economic ties with Chinese businesses, especially the Houston Rockets, having been the team of former NBA player Yao Ming, though the Houston Rockets in particular probably have more Chinese ties with anyone. And the NBA just releasing this statement supporting the Chinese fans, which it's not, as the letter says, it's not reason enough to just completely ignore the horrible situation that China's doing to Hong Kong in suppressing their rights. The letter goes on to suggest that the NBA is hypocritical for its stance on Morey's statements, since it has openly encouraged its players to express controversial opinions before, though largely on domestic issues, not foreign ones. Cracking down here, the group says, is an attack on fundamental American values. And this is true. We have a lot of people in the NBA, a lot of NBA players, for some reason, they're open and freely open to criticize the president of the United States. But when it comes to supporting American values such as freedom and freedom of speech, they really can't do that. So these members of Congress make 4 demands on the NBA. Number 1, that the NBA will reiterate its commitment to being hands-off when it comes to the political beliefs of its players and administrators. So pretty much, NBA, you cannot be involved in what our players, our GMs, our owners believe in. Those their tweets, is their decisions. Number 2, that the NBA will cease doing business with the Chinese until the Chinese drop their boycott of NBA activities. For those who don't know, the Chinese are starting to ban or stop streaming or just canceling a lot of events of NBA in places like Shanghai or in Beijing. So the NBA pretty much, these congressmen and women are pretty much saying that the NBA should cease doing business with the Chinese until the Chinese businesses stop their boycott of the NBA. Number 3, that the NBA will reevaluate its operations in China, including operating its training facility for Chinese players in Jiangxing, just a stone's throw from where China is operating huge concentration camps for ethnic Chinese Muslims. So NBA gonna have to reevaluate some stuff that's doing in China, especially that last part where there's a training facility right next to a huge concentration camp for ethnic Chinese Muslims. That needs to be something that the NBA really deals with. And number 4, clarify that players and administrators are allowed to speak out on human rights abuses at home and abroad. That's really important. The NBA has to be able to assure that right to the if they assure that right to any player who wants to criticize President Trump, why can't they assure that right to anyone who wants to criticize the Communist Party in China who are trying to suppress the rights of the people of Hong Kong? So far, China has dropped its commitment to host a handful of planned preseason exhibition NBA games. It says it will end NBA broadcasts in country. And you have players like Stephen Curry, who refused to speak on the subject during an interview yesterday, who have multi-million-dollar sponsorship contracts with corporations like Nike and Reebok, who sell billions of dollars worth of goods inside China and don't want their own economic interests harmed. So, because the NBA really tried to go with China, it's getting out of hand. This entire NBA situation is getting out of hand, and we're just going to have to see what happens in the upcoming future. All right. Next story, the president of the Ukraine, Zelensky, we are ready to investigate Ukraine's alleged meddling in 2016 election. So during a press conference on Thursday, yesterday, Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky addressed the topic of his famous July 25th phone call with President Trump, including one of the favors Trump mentioned to look into the whole situation of Ukraine's role in the 2016 election. He says, quote, Donald Trump wasn't the only presidential candidate Zelensky doesn't say. Politico's Kenneth Vogel and David Stern wrote in a January 2017 report that has since been cited by multiple administration officials. Donald Trump wasn't the only presidential candidate whose campaign was boosted by official of a former Soviet bloc country. Ukrainian government officials tried to help Hillary Clinton and undermine President Trump by publicly questioning his fitness for office. They also disseminated documents implicating a top Trump aide in corruption and suggested that they were investigating the matter, only to back away after the election. And they helped Clinton's allies research damaging information on Trump and his advisors, a Politico investigation found. So, again, for those who don't know, back in a few weeks back, President Trump released a transcript with President Zelensky asking for a favor to look into the whole situation of the Ukraine in terms of finding out what really happened with that 2016 election. Here's a quote where he asks for the favor. This is President Trump speaking. I would like you to do us a favor, though, because our country has been through a lot and Ukraine knows a lot about it. I would like you to find out what happened with this whole situation with Ukraine. They say CrowdStrike. I guess you have one of your wealthy people. The server, they say Ukraine has it. There are a lot of things that went on in the whole situation. I think you're surrounding yourself with some of the same people. I would like to have the Attorney General call you or your people, and I would like to get you to the bottom of it. As you saw yesterday, that whole nonsense ended with a very poor performance by a man named Robert Mueller. An incompetent performance, but they say a lot of it started with Ukraine. Whatever you can do, it's very important that you do it, if that is possible. So that's the part where Trump pretty much asks why there was an entire investigation on collusion in the first place. Apparently, it started to come up from Ukraine and started to come up when the DNC asked for help to get dirt on President Trump. While the Washington Post says that evidence so far indicates there is nothing that took place in Ukraine that even begins to compare to the Russia intervention in the 2016 election, and slams Republicans' CrowdStrike suspicions as a crazy stuff, the Trump administration and some Republican congressmen, including Senator Ron Johnson, believe there is more than the media would like to admit. During a press conference on Thursday, Zelensky announced that his government is ready to investigate Ukraine's alleged meddling in the U.S. elections, referring back to the 2016 election. So, Eastern European correspondent Christopher Miller reported Tuesday in a series of tweets issued during the press conference. Zelensky also addressed his new Attorney General that will be heading up future investigations. Zelensky says, quote, "This is a new, young team. We will have a new Attorney General, an open, honest person 100%. This is my man," I said. I meant it was a person from my team, not from the old Attorney Generals. When asked about Miller about Ukraine's potential meddling in the next election, Zelensky told him, "I don't want to interfere in any way in the U.S. elections, and I will not be doing it. Elect your own president and do not interfere in the future elections of an independent Ukraine. With due respect for the United States and America's policy, we are not serving the latter's purpose, as we are an independent country. However, we do not want to lose our relations. We wish to strengthen them instead. So we have very important detail there. Zelensky says he does not want to interfere in any way, and he will not be doing that. Meaning that if what back a couple weeks ago, if what Adam Schiff said was true, where Schiff says he wants to find dirt on Joe Biden, that would be contradicting what Zelensky's saying right now, and that's very important. Zelensky's saying he does not want to interfere in the U.S. election that next year. So I think that's really important to understand, and I think that's a big piece in what could potentially become a big impeachment trial. Zelensky also confirmed that he did not even know about the U.S. withholding military aid until after the phone call with President Trump, undermining the Democrats' claim that Trump was using the aid as pressure to force Ukraine to dig up dirt on Joe Biden. President Trump recently tweeted that responded to Zelensky's statement, saying, "The president of Ukraine just stated again, in the strongest of language, that President Trump applied no pressure and did absolutely nothing wrong. He used the strongest language possible. That should end this Democrat scam, but it won't, because the Dems and media are fixed." And you're probably wondering, did President Trump just refer to himself in third person? Yes, he did. So again, big story, big news. Ukraine president stating two things. Number one, that he does not want to interfere in the next election. And number two, that he didn't even know about the U.S. withholding military aid until, I believe it was about a month after the phone call took place. So it kind of eliminates any use of military aid to pressure Ukraine to find dirt on Joe Biden. All right, last story of the day. It's a breaking news story that the CIA whistleblower apparently worked with Democrat Joe Biden. The anti-Trump CIA whistleblower who filed the complaint against President Donald Trump last month, which has led Democrats to call for Trump's impeachment, worked with Democratic presidential candidate Joe Biden when Biden was vice president in the Obama administration. The Washington Examiner reports, the 2020 Democratic candidate with whom the CIA whistleblower had a professional tie is Joe Biden, according to intelligence officers and former White House officials. That's a big deal. If this whistleblower that apparently came out saying that President Trump was trying to find dirt on Joe Biden actually worked with Joe Biden, this is a whole other situation in the first place. I mean, that's a pretty biased source to come from as a whistleblower, to have been working with someone who just so happened to have meddled in Ukraine before President Trump did. The Washington Examiner has established that he is a career CIA analyst who was detailed to the National Security Council at the White House and has since left, the report continued. On September 26th, the New York Times reported that he was a CIA officer. On October 4th, the newspaper added that he was detailed to the National Security Council at one point. On Tuesday, Byron York reported, in an August 26th letter, the intelligence community's Inspector General, Michael Atkinson, wrote that the anonymous whistleblower who was set off the Trump-Ukraine impeachment fight showed some indicia of an arguable political bias in favor of a rival political candidate. Now, however, there is more word that there is more possible bias on the whistleblower's part, because I feel it's kind of weird that the Democrats are trying to hide who this whistleblower is. Like, they find that more important than what the whistleblower actually had to say, because they probably realized that the whistleblower didn't have much to say anyways. But at the end of September, Fox News reported that Atkinson found in his report on the whistleblower that the whistleblower had political bias in favor of a rival candidate of the president. The whistleblower came forward after he was given second-hand and third-hand information about the July phone call between Trump and the president of the Ukraine. So again, that was a big piece in this entire whistleblower report, that he did not have any first-hand knowledge of this entire event. He actually had second or even third-hand knowledge. So it could have been, this could easily be a political ploy. And now we're having some more reports that could be a second or maybe even a third or fourth whistleblower that apparently has first-hand knowledge. So that raises the question if that the second whistleblower was the person who gave the first whistleblower information. It's a bit confusing, but we're just going to have to wait for more details to really come out. The Federalist reports that between May 2018 and August 2019, the intelligence community secretly eliminated a requirement that whistleblowers provide direct first-hand knowledge of alleged wrongdoings. So that's kind of weird, because ironically, like in between that time, you didn't need to have any direct evidence. That doesn't seem correct. Like, if you don't have first-hand knowledge, what are you trying to whistleblow? Like, you're trying to say that you heard from someone who heard from someone, pretty much. That's third-hand, but second-hand is like you heard from someone that President Trump did this, but you don't know if that person is biased and wants to get President Trump out of office. Like, it seems a bit odd that the intelligence community secretly eliminated this requirement of direct first-hand knowledge just around the time when Mueller's report came out, and with this presidential impeachment inquiry. The Federalist continues, this raises questions about the intelligence community's behavior regarding the August submission of a whistleblower complaint against President Donald Trump. The new complaint document no longer requires potential whistleblowers who wish to have their concerns expedited to Congress to have direct first-hand knowledge of the alleged wrongdoing that they are reported. So again, all this just seems a bit odd because it just seems like these events are falling into place. The Intelligence Committee secretly eliminates a requirement to have direct first-hand knowledge, and then it just happens that this first whistleblower comes out with second-hand knowledge about an event and about information that the transcript shows wasn't really there. It just seems a bit strange that all this is coming out, especially from one side of the political party to the other. It's a lot of attacks, especially like for example, with Brett Kavanaugh. There's a lot of attacks against him from the Democrats as well. And obviously, President Trump has been attacked so many times by the Democrats in today's political spectrum. So really interesting stories for the day. A lot of breaking news stories. We have a lot of good information. CIA whistleblower working with Joe Biden. That's a pretty big story. We're just going to have to see how that works out. Ukraine president once again doubling down on the fact that number one, President Trump did not pressure him into wanting to investigate into Joe Biden with military aid, and number two, that he actually will start an investigation against the 2016 election. And the kind of lighthearted story, I guess you could say, with Ted Cruz and AOC joining forces to criticize the NBA's China cowardice. Very important. NBA. I personally will probably not go into any NBA games because it's just weird to me that the NBA would rather. I understand it's a business, but it's freedom versus economic ties with a communist country. I mean, you kind of know what you want to choose there, but the NBA is their own organization. If they want to lose a bunch of money here because of these comments, I mean, they're more than welcome to. All right, well, that's going to be it for today's episode of The Giraldo Show. Thank you very much for tuning in to today's episode. Make sure to give it a like and a follow on any platform that you listen on, and I'm going to see you next week. My name is Sebastian Giraldo, and you are listening to The Giraldo Show.